Hello, welcome to another episode of Dave's Imaginations. Today, you've traveled to Gundeberg on the rumor that there is a bard there that knows something of Arvieaturace as you look to learn more of the lore of this great white dragon. So, stay with me and let's see what this bard might have to know. Arvieaturace, huh? Well, I can tell you about Arvieaturace. Let's see here. Even after the death of Meltharon, Arvieaturace still carried his skeletal remains and rider's palanquin on her back. In his later years, Meltharon used a complex web of spells to keep his bones intact and in their proper place. These magics continued even after his death, causing his skeleton to sit upright and even move his skull to face whichever direction that Arvieaturace was facing. She was more intelligent and patient than most white dragons, and vastly more sensitive, yet still retained her kind's lust for revenge and instinct for savagery, and was not gentle or kind by any means. In combat, she would lose all sense of self-control, ripping and tearing until everything and everyone around her was destroyed. Meltharon's death was keenly felt by Arvieaturace, and she was gripped by a deep and abiding loneliness. She interacted with mortals primarily to find a new, trustworthy companion, but she could never find someone who inhabited all of Meltharon's good qualities. Her abilities? Well, she was notably lacking in magical competence and was only capable of casting mending by herself. In spite of this, she had an immense insight into the battle tactics and the stratagems used by wizards and could recognize many popular spells on sight. This made her very formidable for most spellfingers. She frequently dealt with such foes by flying very low near the ocean waves, enticing casters to waste their spells, firing at a glimpse of what the white worm only to hit nothing but rolling waters. Another tactic involved crushing mages standing on deck by toppling their ship masts. No other creature on Territorial could match her knowledge of the winds and the waves of the Sea of the Swords, the Sword Coast, the large swaths of the eastern trackless sea. She was a true master at sinking ships and at plucking things from decks without ever slowing down or tumbling. Prior to his death, Meltharon bestowed 2 powerful magical boons on Arvieaturace. He permanently bonded her with a ring of spell turning, granting her the ability to shrug off spells or even direct them back at hostile creatures. Meltharon also ensorcelled Ice Claws with a spell of awakening from afar, allowing her full control of his substantial inventory of magical wands, rods, and staves. Her lair? Arvieaturace laired at the top of the ice peak located just south of the Sea of Moving Ice and due west of Fighter Shear. Her main abode was a cloud cavern complex on the peak's east face, right next to a set of smaller chambers that once was home of Meltharon. Ice Peak consisted largely of soft, malleable rock that was easily sculpted by the dragon's claws. Arvieaturace took care when digging out her cavern to allow for the walls separating the wizard's sanctum to be carefully removed from her side, allowing her access with her snout and claw. The soft rock was also meant that Ice Peak was not the sturdiest of lairs. Bits of roof would come crushing down whenever she bumped into it or made too heavy of a landing. She was fiercely protective of her isle, attacking those who sailed too close on sight. She was even known to venture far beyond her own territory in pursuit of fleeing adventurers. It was said that magic items and spellbooks belonging to Melthoron could still be found in his old rooms, largely where he left them. Activities? She preyed on ships along the Sword Coast, sometimes destroying them entirely. In the process, she seemed to be committed to eating as many sailors as she could, and in making all seafarers and other dragons terrified at the prospect of journeying north of Rothin. Few ships could mount an appropriate defense against Arvieaturace's overwhelming attacks. She was known to have been driven off on occasion by aerial patrols from Evermeet, as well as the Nimbran Knights of the Flying Hunt. After Melthron's death, Iceclaws, the other name for Arvieaturace, was Iceclaws. Iceclaws became overwhelmed by the loneliness to the point that she sometimes spared would-be victims, provided they shared her dislike of wizards, and they did not attack her, and had the presence of mind to try communicating with her. She was even known to, on rare occasions, rescue shipwrecked victims when offered lavish rewards and treated with respect. Several humans snatched by Arvieaturace actually survived captivity in her lair after enduring roughly a month's worth of terrifying and suspicious conversations with the worm, provided these captives did not attack her or steal any of her things, or Melthoron's things. Iceclaws was happy to fly them home to any location of Faerun as soon as they admitted to feeling lonely. The accounts of these survivors made up the brunt of what was known of Arvieaturace and her lair. Arvieaturace, or Iceclaws, frequently came under attack from other dragons, humans, and elvish dragon hunters, as well as her own offspring. Relationships? Well, although their relationship began in hatred, Arvieaturace eventually came to love her rider, Melthorond. He treated her as an equal, and the two chatted with each other constantly. When Melthorond died, after many centuries of companionship, she fell into a deep melancholy. Her loneliness, her tragedy, occasionally compelled Arvieaturace to answer the White Dragon Authoritor's call to mate. On these occasions, she left the remains of Melthorond at home. During the last decade, Authoritor sought to provide her a new master, and that is yet to come. Once, when her children grew large and bold enough to challenge her domain over Ice Peak, Arvieaturace drove her children away to fend for themselves. Arvieaturace had friendly relationships based on mutual respect with the arch-wizard Laeral Silverhand of Waterdeep and the shipwright Old Alden of Minthurn. She was feared in Candledeep, as in many places. But in Candledeep, she was feared because of an incident in which, having learned from one of her captives of a sage's disparaging account of Melthorond, she flew directly to the fortress of the library, ripped the roof off the main building, and snatched up the terrifying rider to correct his views on the dead wizard. Less than a month later, Laeral personally visited Arvieaturace at the Ice Peak to hand her a copy of the more laudatory tome, The High History of the Mighty Mage Melthorond. Laeral stayed with Iceclaws for more than a 10-day, hence discussing matters of unknown nature. What is known, though, is that the following Laeral's visits, Arvieaturace seemed to steer clear of vessels sailing in the vicinity of Waterdeep. Rumors and legends? Well, Arvieaturace was feared by sailors along the along the Sword Coast, save for the foolish few who dismissed her as legend. Seafarers referred to her as ice claws due to her habit of swooping down on ships and grabbing crew members for a quick snack. Where is she now? Perhaps the Sea of Swords. She has one of her lairs here on Gundolin. But we haven't seen her in more than a month. So, be wary as you sail this sort of coast for the Dragon of Ice Claws, Arvieaturace. And if you learn a new story I'd be interested in knowing, and I might write a new song. I hope this answers all your questions. I bid adieu. So, there you have it. The lore of Arvieaturace as read by the bard of Gundolin's, the Dragon Turtle Inn bard and the harpist. And as she tells the story of Arvieaturace as almost word for word from the Forgotten Realms Wiki, performed for the benefit of my Dungeons & Dragons group, but perhaps you could use it as well. Perhaps you found it informative. If you did, you're welcome. If you didn't like it, But if you did like it, if you wouldn't mind hitting that like and subscribe, maybe I'll do more of these. It was pretty easy to do. So thank you for watching, and until next time, bye.